So that works as long as things are going well.
Okay. Yeah.
The minute that things don't go well,
Right.
what saves you is your process. All right, so welcome back, everybody. Behind the Grind with Rich Brubaker and
Brian Tam.
we're here with another episode, having a lot of fun over the last 6, 7, 8 episodes, covering a lot of territory. Apparently, we got a little bit fluffy.
That's yeah.
Today we're getting a little bit down closer to the bone because he's been fasting. So what are we talking about today, Brian?
We got the topic of process. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs are these kind of chaotic people, and we are creative spirits, and we have this mission that we're on, and and so much chaos that's going on around us, right? Everything's just getting set up, and we have no idea how to develop a real system and a real process. And so, even I remember when I started, I didn't know that it was. I didn't think it was important.
Right.
And I had priorities of just trying to earn some money, but you have other people coming in, you start to expand the team, you start to just want to do things better.
Yep.
And recently I've been thinking about process. So that's the
It's a big
overarching topic.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. Now, and it's a good one because actually I was thinking when you mentioned that when you got started, like the only process you needed back then was that your laptop turned on, and that like you could connect to the internet, and that you could get over the Great Firewall. Like you just need the basics.
You meet people. That's the first
Right,
process, right? And then the computer, and you need to give them something, right?
Right.
Now, but yeah.
What I find is actually process gets really important, particularly as you're growing through the organization. So there's like a couple of key things that people talk about, like when you're at 3 people, you go to 10, when you go to 30, when you go to 100, when you go to 300. At every one of these stages, like your process has to radically change.
So first question is, when was the first time you realized you needed a process? Like, what was it like before? And
processes that I focus on early on would probably be accounting.
Okay.
I tried to, from the start off, kind of follow like you like what is everyone else using, and people like Quicken or QuickBooks or Quick whatever. And what I realized, like I didn't have the actual process required to basically like every month sit down and do it.
Right.
I got into this habit where I do it like every quarter, then that would slip, and then I get to at the end of the year
as necessary, basically.
As necessary, right? And then actually I had a bit of a scare, as it were, where you have to submit your audits every year, and I think I was like 6 months behind.
Ooh.
And I'm getting like these threatening, like you're gonna get fined, and I was like, shit. So I realized that I need to give up the fact that this process doesn't work, and hire someone who can make it work.
So what was that like turning point then?
I think it was kind of like around that time where I'm like, if I'm going to grow, I can no longer continue this madness, and I can't.
How do you know it was madness? That's the point.
Because I'm getting letters saying like, look, you're gonna be fined.
That's
if you don't do that. And then the second thing actually I realized is that by trying to develop this myself, by trying to make my own process, I was actually taking so much time away from what I was supposed to be doing, which is to sell the product and the service that I was building.
Right.
And so it interrupts what your core
How far in
business
were you
is.
at this point?
Probably 2 years.
Yeah, so you've been like holding out for a while.
I've been holding out for a while, right? Because I'm trying to save a bit of money.
Yeah, sure. That's how you rationalize it, right? Like, why would I pay anything extra at this point? I'm not, things aren't certain yet. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's extra cash. That's my cash.
Yeah.
Right.
And I will say, like, that worked for probably 2 years. I had, from HR's perspective, I basically went from like me throwing stuff up on a website like, hey, I need people, to having proper JDs, having other people review those JDs.
Internally or externally or
both.
What? Yeah. And
then having people apply specifically to those JDs. Wow, actually when you get into these topics, you start to like really peel back the onion.
Yeah.
One other thing that kind of came up was another reason I knew that our HR process was not very strong was because my team was starting to tell me, one, that it wasn't very strong, and they started writing the manuals. They started saying like, look, you need these things. Yeah. We've got to get this done to make sure that everyone has a great experience.
Right.
So at first you're just like trying to find people, then you're just trying to find the right people, then you're trying to retain them, and now you're trying to develop them. And actually I would say within each phase of that, I learned a lot about how each phase is very different, and you can't just, the starting point, it can just be you and a laptop and maybe your part-time or your contractual obligations. But as you start to build an organization, you need to really think about process very differently.
But how does it help you?
It takes away the stress of failure. So really recently, we'd gotten to about 10, 12 people in the organization. We hired someone, and we didn't have an employee handbook at the time. Yeah. And so we had a lot of challenges.
We had other processes. But
we had other processes. We had all the filters in place for hiring, so
things were starting to come together, but this employee handbook was missing.
this piece was missing.
Okay.
And so when we had challenges, we didn't have an ability to like
nothing
end the contract. We had nothing to reference.
For me, as I'm thinking about it for my own team, they are wild, chaotic people too. We're a bunch of creatives, right? So don't give me a fucking process. Go fuck yourself, right? Like that's how we think. That's when I see a handbook, this is my reaction.
So that works as long as things are going well.
Okay. Yeah.
The minute that things don't go well, what saves you is your process.
So how were they reacting to this handbook, and what was it, before and after, this kind of stuff?
So with every investment that we put into the process, actually, I think there's a couple reasons why I didn't do it. One was I didn't recognize the value, right? Like, so we were talking about like, when did you realize that it needed to come in? Well, the pain got too great. The lost opportunity became too noticeable. So I got to do it. But then the second thing is like, I used to have a much more kind of an engaging relationship, I'd say, with my staff. Like I was really like just one-on-one.
You had time
like,
to
viewed
manage
people separately. I had time to manage that. But what I realized is like when you're working with one person and then you tell somebody else if there's any variability, that becomes a problem.
And then they don't understand how to reconcile the difference between the two because it's not black and white.
Yeah, so you need those processes in place. And you need to stick to it. It's painful to go through it.
Right.
It's painful to spend the time sometimes. It's distracting you from selling things. Or
it doesn't seem like valuable in the short term.
Until you need it.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a kind of an investment. I mean, outsourcing, that's not an investment. I would say that's regular work. But then, spending time to develop the process and add the rigor to it, the standards and everything.
Well, so the outsourcing thing, actually, I'd say that becomes its own interesting process as well. I've started outsourcing a number of things that I would say are non-core to the company, where I can focus only on the product, only the company, managing that core team.
Give me an example.
So we're doing this new sustainable tours idea, right? So we put together the 5 cities that we're going to go to. We're going to identify the entrepreneurs. We're going to bring together the whole agenda. We put that onto a PowerPoint. Now, I have a choice. Do I hire someone full-time to basically sit there and make my PowerPoints look nice, manage them, bring them on my HR system, manage all that process?
Is that worth it for you?
Is it worth it for me? Or do I outsource it? Now, a few years ago, I brought it all in, or I looked for people who could do that because it was easier for me. I can see you. I know what you're working on. I can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But then I started to realize, like, actually, that against someone who's online, who can just send me stuff every Monday at 5, who I can actually view unemotionally as well. I can remove the emotions from the process. That for me allows for a better product at the end of the day. It reduces my stress. It actually speeds up the process overall. Because someone in my house might be working on 3 or 4 different things. But now I can go find one outsourced individual who can work on that one specific thing, finish it faster, get it to me so I can put it on the market faster.
More specialization too, for both for you and for them, right? I mean, you can get higher quality there, and in-house you also increase the quality. So it's like a double, triple win.
And I need in my house right now the people who can research the issues, who can manage product, manage process, manage clients. I don't need someone full-time right now who needs to do graphic design around some of our materials.
No, that's not your core technical competency, right? So bringing it back to like other entrepreneurs who are watching this, they would probably definitely need to focus on their core competency, whatever that technical skill set or service that you're providing, and then everything else trying to offload.
I think this is where kind of that growth comes, is the fact that I think early on, for myself and for other entrepreneurs I've talked to, they're really uncomfortable with the idea that they can't control everything. They really feel like they need to be involved in every single piece of the process itself.
Love control.
But it undermines you.
Yeah, it does.
Because you're not focusing on the things that you're actually really good at.
But I'm good at everything.
But you're not, because you haven't set. So this is the part of building.
I truly believe that.
This is the part of building an HR process, accounting process, website, like all these non-core things to your business that are foundational to the business but non-core to the sales. You think you're good at it?
Right.
Go build a website.
Yeah.
And then factor in that time, factor in that budget, and then go find some 15-year-old and see time, budget, like you are undermining yourself.
Right.
And this is what I've actually learned through all this process. Like when you don't have a process in place, at some point you're undermining yourself. And you're undermining your business, you're undermining your mission. That's why you need someone, if you can't help yourself through it, to help you see the process. Right. Because otherwise,
it sounds a little bit though like you're talking about outsourcing rather than process. So if I could refocus the conversation a little bit towards more like developing a process, outsourcing is a valuable conversation, and I think it's a component of expanding your process and
Okay, so
adding
here could be another one
professional rigor
from
to
an
it.
HR perspective.
Yeah.
People be like, Rich, I work for you for a year. Can I have a annual review? Okay. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Versus, okay, here's a form
Yeah.
with 15 questions that we want you to self-assess yourself, fill it out, send it back to us. We will,
Right.
we'll comment as well. Then let's sit down, and through that time, through that process, we'll then come to what does your next year look like? Well,
Right.
now we have a process for what your next year looks like because we know what the next title above you is. We know what the next requirements of the next job are because we've thought about how to elevate people through the organization as an actual process,
Right.
not as everyone is their own unique individual, so everything needs to be tailored for them. But you need to have the frameworks in place so you can help people see like there's clarity for them.
And so, you said you started to talk about this or a couple years ago, and now it's come to this other point where, you're adding this handbook, for example, right? And so it seems like every couple months you're hitting these new milestones where you need to add more and more and more processes, right? And my question is, we're really talking about a semi-mature entrepreneur or business. I mean,
My staff would definitely say I'm not semi-mature.
more semi than mature,
more
right?
semi, yeah.
But like, that's what I'm thinking about is, not everybody here is in your position yet, right? So when do they need it? When is it becoming? When do they need to start to think about it? And how are they starting to layer it on?
When you have multiple team members coming in telling you the same thing.
Yeah.
When you have an environment that's going toxic and you don't understand it, there's probably a process failure. I've seen that. I mean, I saw that last year, right? And it's not about, I think the other thing is you need to separate yourself from the emotion of entrepreneurship. The fact that it's you, it's not. You need a process to remove that variability because that variability is actually your emotional, spectrum.
Yeah, it's how you feel that day. Did you eat or not?
Did I eat or not? And I'll give you 5% versus 3%. Did you eat or not? I know how to help you.
Did you sleep or not? And how how is that gonna affect this?
Have you been sleeping at all this quarter?
It shouldn't be right. That variance shouldn't be as much.
How are you feeling about the business? Like
it's not to say that we're taking away the human component from this thing, right? I mean, emotions and relationships will always be a factor and a huge critical part of it. But it's just having another reference point from a point of view, maybe from somebody else as you outsourced it,
right.
or from a time when you actually invested time to think about it with some rigor and went through the logic, right? Because not every time you're going to go through it and have that, clear research and thought process.
And now the other side of this is to also understand as you're going through this process of developing process, right? Like we're now getting to inception level type stuff. The challenge is actually the balance is to make sure you're not putting in things that limit the organization.
Right.
Like you're putting in so much framework, so much this, so much that the staff are like, no, this is my box, and your product is only here. Like
that's the worry for the creative entrepreneur like myself and my team. Right. I'm always my job is to push against that box for other organizations, right, and help them realize this box is artificial. Like, do you know that you can work outside the handbook?
Right.
Do you know to be innovative? Which is our job. Help people to think and develop new shit. You have to think, all right, what else are you going to be doing? This is your job description. Yes. Do you know what your responsibility is, though?
And so actually, when you're going through that, what you start to really figure out is like, there are things that are core, they're non-negotiable. That's what you solidify first. And then all the other stuff that's like the fun, the variance, the interesting, the creative, the whatever, we'll learn over time how to develop process as needed. And I think that's what we did. We actually, and maybe that's part of the challenge. That's why you see like the 3, 10, 30, 100, like they see it very differently is we took it kind of slow. It's taken us about 9 months at this point to get to where I think that we're in a really good spot.
Wow. That's
we're chipping away at it, right? Like we do the little things that were easy, like introduce lunch and learns, introduce the new JDs, introduce the new annual surveys, like introduce and then also create a process whereby it's not an annual, it's not a quarterly, it's a much more regular feedback from an HR perspective, right? It's not just about whether or not the entrepreneur themselves is clear about this. It's also about whether or not the organization is as well. I think the other challenge about this, the reason why I think it's important to discuss is if you go from like 3, 5, 10 people to 50 very quickly, there's one of the main reasons why those organizations fail outside of cash flow is that the team just implodes. And my feeling from talking to other entrepreneurs who've gone to that level is because they moved so fast. They didn't realize their process didn't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be the accounting process, that could be the legal process, that could be the HR the onboarding process, it could be the exit interview. Like there's all these subtopics below that, but because they had an old handbook for 5 people, and it didn't grow with the organization.
No relevant. Yeah.
There was no relevance. There was no upkeep. There was no one valued it at the time.
Right.
It failed. Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a couple times recently. So it's
how
really important.
How much do you need to invest into such things? I mean, I'm not talking about money, but in terms of like percentage of time or percentage.
Well, if you're in the middle of a crisis, 150% of your time, it's too late. But not much. Like a few hours a month, if you have the right person who's helping you through this, they come to you and say, we need to do 1, 2, and 3. And actually, over time, if they've been with you and they understand what the organization looks like, what the organization needs, the rhythm, you'll sort of go, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then, okay, for later, we'll look at this. But what I find is if you have this in place, if you're thinking out in advance, like, okay, I'm a 10-person company now, I'm going to be 50 in X amount of time.
Right.
What does the organization need to look like then?
Right.
You're actually building a better organization at 10 people.
Right.
Because you're helping them understand what it's going to look like going forward, but also what steps do they need to take to lead that effort as well, to really be core to that. Because you don't want to rotate all these people all the time. You don't want to rotate. You don't want people sending you letters.
You don't want that variability too. When they leave, and somebody, Joe Schmo, comes in, how are his or her skills going to be compared to the last person?
Yeah, but think about like if I've got no process and it's all variability, think about the culture of my researchers. Think about the quality of my consultants. If everything's totally variable, the clients, the product, the service, it's all also going to be variable. So the nice thing about having a mindset for some of this stuff is that you start to apply it to other things in the organization that bring you long-term benefit as well.
There's a lot more rigor, and you feel confident. You feel more confident as you're going through it. When you're, as you were saying that, I was like, wow, it must feel great when you're talking to a client and you feel that it's not all on you. Yeah, exactly. Early on, as the founder, whatever, a lot of that weight is on you. But eventually, when you get those processes and handbooks in place and whatever, other people know how to do it, that you don't have to worry about that. I guess that's the stress that you're talking about.
Oh yeah, it's massively stressful.
Once that stress is off your back, then when you're going out and talking to somebody, you can bring that confidence with you. Yeah. Right. And that, and you think about the value that you have on that, right? Yeah. So that's where the upside is, right?
Yeah, like you're not sitting in front of clients wondering about what's happening back in the office. You're like fully engaged on their need, on how you can help them, and on making that engagement.
So in terms of even process is still somewhat of a fluffy word, because if we can, what does that mean? So what I heard so far is you can outsource it, you can have a handbook. Yeah. What are the other components of a process? Can we break that down further? To be really dumb about it, right? To be clear, not dumb. Let me be straight here. It's to be clear.
Well, I think you need to really have a good handle on the business itself, right? Where things are going well, where things are struggling, and figure out what steps can you take that basically are unnegotiable, that support the organization long term. So you have an accounting process, you have an HR process, you have these things that just support your growth.
So those are the components, right? Some of the components, like HR and accounting and legal, like you said, and some IT stuff. But what does that mean? Are there online systems too that you use as a part of the process, or is there how do you keep track? We come up with processes all the time, but people forget or people ignore them or what?
Going back to our talk about pricing, right? Actually, this is a great example. Yeah. How do you know how to price yourself? Well, you start off with the process of just try it. Yeah. I gave everyone a different price to see what people buy into. But over time, you start to hopefully find that there's a band that people are willing to accept. And you start writing your proposals very differently once you have that band. You're expressing confidence. You know exactly what you ask for, and you negotiate very differently. Before, I need 50%. You're like, okay, fine, because you don't know.
So you're talking about establishing the benchmarks and the standards and the unnegotiables as you were talking about, right? And it takes some time to narrow into that, right? Definitely. How about for the other people? How do they know what the process is? Again, honestly, I know my process. I have it very, very clear in my mind. Right. My team, I explain it to them. I work it through with them. I explain it block by block, page by page, slide by slide. I walk them through it in their work. Right. Next week, it's all gone.
So that's his fault.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I'm asking, right? I need to continue to get better at it.
One thing so gets into your management.
Wait, his
process.
fault is his or my fault?
It's always your fault.
It's always my fault, right? I just clarify. I was like, wait, his? Yeah.
Yeah. So this gets into your management process.
Yeah.
And actually, at HandsOn, I experienced that early on as well. Right. Now this is going back many, many years ago, and there was two. So we have all these programs, we have all these marketing materials, we have everything in place that I felt that I had built that made the organization great. Right. It was my vision. It was my. Blah, blah. But as I start to build a team, as I start to trust them, as they start to come up and they have their ideas, they have their ways, this is where you giving up a bit of it becomes really important, because you start to realize, like, actually, I don't need to focus on this anymore. That's what my team is for, and that's what they're great at. I need to focus on taking it to the next level. So yeah, when you start that process and you start telling people, like, this is the product, this is the process, this is the marketing, this is the delivery mechanisms, whatever, they're never going to get it like you did, ever. And you have to reduce your expectation on that side. But you just have to make sure that they have the foundational aspects to it. That they're going to deliver.
Non-negotiables that you talked about.
Non-negotiables, right? Like, we worked on that PowerPoint for HandsOn, like the overview, right? They know all the slides in and out. They'll learn how to deliver it on their own. But the core information still remains. That core process still remains. They still deliver it person to person. They still deliver it with these key messages. Yes, there's going to be some variance in there. But that's fine, right? And that actually allows them, that allows everyone in the organization to be engaged in the work they do. If you're just telling them, like, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, you can only have 5 people in your organization. You have to be such a micromanager that you're sacrificing the potential growth of the organization. Some people are totally happy with that. Some people are also able to find the 5 lieutenants underneath them that are their exact carbon copy and do that as well. But I don't think that's good for the organization.
Right. I mean, it's very limiting too. I think so. I think we're this is a huge topic, and I think we're just scratching the surface of it. And I want to go to the other end of the spectrum then, right? How do you know it's too much process? Before we wrap up, right? Like, how do we know I've gone too far and I've made the employee handbook from hell?
I think when you find your team basically feeling frustrated and expressing frustration that they're unable to grow as individuals, that they're unable to come up with their own ideas, that they're unable to do the job that they came to do. Not just the job they want to do, but the job
the mission.
The mission. They're like, look, you've got this in the way. We need to try it. And when you start getting that feedback on a regular basis, like, there's always going to be 1 or 2 people who have an opinion. But when an opinion becomes really like something that's established as agreement among the team, then you need to make sure and remain open to it. There was one really interesting insight that kind of came out of one discussion, which was, we're losing millennials at about the 2nd and 3rd year mark, and they're leaving. Good. It's not bad. It's not bad. Right, I'm happy that I get to keep them that long.
3 is good.
3 is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But what we were talking about was the fact that they're leaving not for other jobs. They're taking 3 months off. They're taking 6 months off. They're going to travel. They don't have that pressure because, well, in Asia they can live with their parents, right?
Well,
Now, so we thought about, what if we changed our retention process? What if we said, after 2 years, you get 1 month to travel?
1 month.
1 month, and then you have to come back
because you looked at the pattern.
You look at the pattern. They don't want to leave your organization. They want to go travel. They want to experience something. They want to grow in a different way. But it would have been
outside of the norm,
totally outside
in the handbook or whatever at expectation at that time.
Yeah.
So you reworked
because we started to see, like, the culture of the individuals, the culture of the organization. The worst thing you can do is have people just constantly rotate. You can't build a knowledge base in the organization.
Right.
So how can we look at what's currently going on and adjust ourselves, adjust our process to be better aligned to that?
Right, that's really smart.
When it was like, no, I'm an old guy. We never.
Of course not.
We didn't do that when I was blah blah blah. But then I started to think about it. I'm like, well, what's the goal? The goal is to build an organization, to have excited people, to develop the best product, and to deliver it to the market.
Yeah. So
how does my HR policy, how does that process, how does the way that I engage with my team need to change to make sure that we reach our full potential? So now I'm like, let's talk about that. If we go along that route, if we say every 2 years, or is it a 3rd year? Is it 5 years? You get 2 months.
You can work it out.
Let's work through the framework of this thing, establish the core, understand the variance. Like, what are the other questions that would come in? Oh, I want to do this. I want
Yeah,
there some acceptable ranges?
Right.
And then what other ways in our HR policy do we need to tweak?
Right.
So the one thing that we did right off was now for every year that so at the end of your first year and then every year thereafter, you're given 2 days of self-learning. Now you have to enroll in a class. You have to show that you're going to learn something. We don't care if you're learning how to make.
So self-learning meaning they go out and
learn
class.
something that's just interesting to them. It doesn't matter.
Pottery.
Like be a barista for 2 days. Like whatever. Like it doesn't have to be related to our business.
Yeah.
But it has to be related to your personal development.
That's really cool, man.
Right. So it's 2 days.
Offer. Yeah.
Now again, at first I was like, but
you're going soft.
I'm going soft because we already.
That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, as a hardcore kind of.
But you start again going back to the idea that why do you become open to it? Well, because you realize the downside, the pain of not doing it is more than the cost of doing it. So losing people every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
What if it becomes every 6 months?
Right.
Well, if you start to throw that carrot out, they're going to make it through the first year. They're going to make it through 2 years. They're going to make it through 5 years. And that's what you want. You want a culture of like where
that's
people
how
are
you get that retention that you were talking about earlier. You're keeping the best people and rewarding them in a certain way, in the way that they want, whether it's a class or a time off or whatever.
Because the process for us was very much a defensive one as a starting point. Let's protect ourselves from potentiality of a bad actor.
Yeah.
But now we're like, well, how do we proactively look at our HR to attract the best ones?
Right.
And
I think
to retain
that
them.
really stuck out to me when you're talking about building the organization that you want to have, right? For the next level, right? That will require working backwards to create the process, right? That to me is a standout.
I think early on, if I look at myself as an early entrepreneur versus now, one of the things that's very different about how I approach something, and it could be any of the processes in our space, would be I start off very defensively. Fix what's broken.
Sure.
And make sure it doesn't break again.
Right.
Versus now, put in things that will put us into a better place to build in the future. And I think like the cost of failure as you're growing are much higher, not just financially, but also like reputationally, also emotionally, but you're never going to protect what you currently have by just acting defensively. You need to constantly look at the growth side of these processes. So you're like, look, I'm ready for another 3 people, another 10 people.
Yeah.
What's my cash flow look like?
Right.
I have a clear trajectory because I put in a cash management system. What does the HR need to look like? What's the onboarding process? Like all these things come in, and actually, what you realize is it's kind of like going to the gym, and you get really comfortable with that one machine. You start to build muscle. You start to get stronger. You start to grow. You're never going to do that if you walk around and just like pick up every once in a while. Like you need to have repetition, and that's I think what process really provides. Or that's what I'm appreciating now over time.
That's so cool.
So actually, following that, there's a few key components to what I think make a great process when it comes to these. One is that it protects your downside. It puts you in a position to take the upside, right? Like it puts you in a position where your organization can grow. It's easy to understand. Like it's not so complicated that you then get the inability of anyone to follow it, right?
Components you were saying?
Well, I think it's just gotta be easy to follow.
So you're saying those are the criteria?
Yeah. Well, like if I'm looking at how I'm gonna make an improvement, right? And I'm gonna put it in this new whatever. It has to protect me. Like that's usually where you start. Over time, it has to be the foundational stone that allows you to stand up and grow. Now, for that to work, the biggest component then is that it has to be really transparent and fair to the team. The team has to see like real value in this, and they have to be able to adopt the process. So like you're talking about how you're basically doing a train the trainer in-house around a certain thing. If people the next day are not listening to you, it's not easy enough, it's not transparent enough, it's not working for them. So that you can't fight the flow. You can't reverse course through a single process. Otherwise, it's going to fail. It has to really go with the flow. And if it's going direct current as a starting point, that really helps. If you want to move the river a little bit over time, you can make those adjustments. That's okay. But if you're trying to do 180 degrees, you're going to get total fight back. It's going to fail your organization.
It's going to implode, as you said. So that's really important. And really, as we were talking about this, what I heard was just again and again, you're like, here's the feedback point. Somebody said to me, right? Here's the pain point. And I was starting to lose money, right? And you started to adjust. You were not fighting the things that were happening around you, right?
Right.
And you were like, all right, you're really observant. I thought that was really amazing. And you're okay. This is happening. That's happening. That's happening. And you're just taking those signs, right? I mean, I'm sure there's
but it's like
stretched out across several years.
If you get shot, man, you know where you got shot. It's
Yeah.
not being observant. You're very clear about where the pain is.
Some of these things aren't getting shot. That's for me. That's what it's more of like, I got a headache. It's probably nothing, you know.
Google it.
Yeah, I got this thing in my back. I'm not sure if it's really, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So these things, I think, are the dull pains that are going to wear you down over time.
Right.
Not getting shot. I mean, you get shot, you go into triage. You got to fix that problem right away. You go to ER or whatever, right? And we know how to deal with those problems.
Right.
But the dull aches, that's when you need a process, really.
Right.
So you can smooth things out. So other people know how to smooth things out.
So you can more quickly identify the problem and address it.
Yeah.
Or so you can learn how to dodge it to begin with, right? Like,
right. To preempt it in the future.
To preempt it.
So I mean, as I was hearing what you were talking about throughout this whole conversation, it was just, those are the key points. I was like, really, really, like, if you were to think about it for yourself after watching this, what are those friction points for you? What are those aches? What are those kind of, what are the people telling you on your team? What are the people telling you outside? And are you really listening to that feedback? Because it's there. I mean, if it's not there, then you're not talking to anybody or you're not listening.
Yeah, or your ego, you're being defensive about your model, your product, whatever it may be.
You were so kind of selfless, or like, this is the process is taking away your ego so that you can actually get the work done, right? So the business, which is not you, the business is going to run without you and in a positive way, which sounds amazing actually. Yeah. I think in some ways, like you talked about that control thing. Letting that go, letting go of that ego. This is what that process is going to work around. It's that next layer.
You realize like it doesn't work in your favor.
Yeah.
It works when it's just you.
So cool.
But when you have so many people around you, like in the last week, like had an exit interview, and it was like, it was open. I'm like, okay, had to learn to make adjustments here. We lost a bid, and I just directly asked, like, why did we lose the bid? We've been talking about this for 3 months. You never mentioned anybody else.
Right.
What is it? Like, just tell me. And like, oh, we decided to go a whole different way. Okay, fine, thank you. And you show appreciation for that.
Right.
All this feedback that you're getting, it's early on the process is be defensive. Your ego fuels you. You don't know what you're talking about. But you don't understand me. You understand the product. But then you start to realize, like, no, actually, it's half. You need to better adjust to whatever feedback it is.
That's huge,
Incorporate that and go forward.
That's huge. That's it. That's
it.
the process.
That's the process.
If you have any process about entrepreneurship, that is it.
Yeah.
Listen to the feedback, work towards that, and lean into it and go. Yeah. Just fucking go.
And just pay someone to do your website for you. That's it. So, all right, man, cool.
Beautiful episode. I think this is the beginning of a topic. The
Definitely.
process, is a massive thing. I mean, we're just talking, we didn't even touch upon like the RFP process, the marketing process, the management process. There's some like HR things that we did talk about, but I think we can always go deeper. Let us know what those are the key questions that you have now that we didn't answer yet. And I think, what are the processes that you're working on? Just let us know. Let's chat about this because this is a huge topic. I think we're gonna come back to it again and again. Let us know.
Thank you very much. Rich Brubaker.
Behind the Grind, Brian Tam.